Good morning from AlphaWolfTrading.com. I'm Tim coming at you with this morning's pre-market prep. Something I do each and every day for the pro members over at Alpha Wolf Trading. Pre-market preps, market wraps, sector watch, all kinds of stuff over there at Alpha Wolf Trading. If you're interested, come check us out. Sign up to receive these weekly stocks to watch videos and Friday pre-market prep videos sent directly to your email. All right, so let's go ahead and roll with what we've got going on this morning. So we've had a pretty interesting week, seeing some weakness out there. Already did a live pre-market session with some of the members over at Alpha Wolf Trading and went through a few stocks. We're going to blast through those real quick. Just taking a look at MGM, actually was on the weekly time frame here, potential area of support, but actually I think MGM for a long-term proposition, potential long-term holding becomes very compelling around the 200-day moving average. Now right now it's at an area of potential price support right here at about 30 bucks. If that holds, maybe we see a short-term bounce. It is extremely oversold. The casinos have had a pullback recently, but this is starting to look fairly compelling. More of a long-term hold, right around 30 bucks. 28.50 would be a great entry for that one. Another long-term hold consideration, GE. We kind of targeted $24 as our entry price on GE. Now there's a analyst that came out with a $22 price target. You know, look, this is, as a place to park some money in a market maybe that gets a little choppy, pays a decent dividend. I think $24 would be a really attractive entry to have some cash sitting. If you look at this long-term trend line from 2009 to here, I mean, GE has been really hasn't gone anywhere in a couple of years, right? But we do have some price support here at $24, and then if you look at it, that would also be a trend line support. So you'd have a little price support, you'd have a longer term trend line that could act as support, and I think it's a fairly compelling, it's a big fixed stock, 8.7 billion shares in the floats. I've actually got an alert set for a break below 26, and then I'll probably set another alert for a break below 25. And then as we approach that $24 area, I mean, we may not tag 24 exactly, maybe get down to 24.50, but that could be a place that I would look to maybe start building a position for a long-term hold consideration. So this morning we've got one high flyer, low floater, and this has been a stock that has had some big moves in the past. It's a competitor of Taser, which is now AAXN, and they had looks like they had a patent ruling in their favor. It looks like a pretty good headline. It is gapping this morning, gapping pretty significantly. Up into the $5 and what are we at? Got up to 580. So it had a pretty huge gap here. I have some experience with and look at that. Look at that. 580 is where we've got some congestion, right? We've got some pretty good price resistance in that area. This candle here popped up to just over $6 and failed, right? So that's where we're gapping to this morning. Look, don't chase the gap on this thing. It's a nice ruling, but I can tell you from previous patent experience, they may have won with the U.S. Patent Attorney's Office, but they have a long ways to go to win the case in the court of law. And even if they win the case in the court of law, it can be overturned in the Supreme Court, right? So, I mean, they're years away from anything substantial happening. It's a good win. Maybe Taser just winds up buying these guys. I don't know, to make them go away. A lot of things potentially could happen, but uh, don't chase this gap, right? Look for a area of potential support. You know, could pull back to $5. See some support there. We do have some price support in that area, 490 or so. Maybe even pull back to 459, the 200 day, and look for a bounce, right? For an intraday play. If we get some real significant volume, maybe even a pullback to 450, $4, right? I mean, this thing closed at $3.25 yesterday, so that's a big move off of a patent ruling. So just be careful with this one. 4.9 million shares in the float, 18% short interest. It can be a pop and flopper, and I'm just going to take a look real quick here and see what the financials look like. I think they did an offering not too long ago. So they've got 910,000 in cash. It looks like, and at least that's what they had. And this last snapshot here, 910,000, 4.9 million in debt, and they're burning through almost 8 million. So you know, here's the thing: they need cash, right? They need cash. They're burning through 8 million, and they have 4 million in debt, and they only have 900,000 in the bank. They're going to need to raise cash. So I see an offering potentially in the very near future. So be very careful with DGLY, but that doesn't mean you can't take it for a scalp if you find a good intraday setup. What I mean by don't chase it, don't chase the opening candle. Do not put a market order in on the opening candle, right? You're going to top tick most likely you're going to top tick the stock. So just be careful. All right, AAXN could also move, and you know, look, AAXN actually has a pretty good looking setup on the daily. It had a nice pop. They just had a nice order placed for their Taser guns. DGLY is not suing, or does not have a lawsuit against the Taser guns. They have a lawsuit against the cameras. So sitting right on top of the 50 day, which just crossed above the 200 day, and pretty nice look, right? Now this is pulling back to 23.95. It did pull back to 23.95, $24. So where does that put us? That puts us right here, right to this support, and then bounced. Now listen, if we break below there, this is a fairly small float too. 44 million shares in the float, 39% short interest. 24 looks like an area of potential price support. You know, if that fails, maybe $23, right? Could be an interesting area to take it for a bounce. And what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at this trend line, right? That could act as support, and then you've got potential price support in this area, $23. It looks like it bounced up to 25. If this thing gets down to $23, I think it's worth taking for a potential bounce. If you get a bounce, you could maybe hold some shares overnight for a swing. I mean, this one is going to be on my radar for sure for a potential entry, and I may be looking to do more of a swing, maybe a combo swing day trade. We'll see. If you get a nice bounce, you know, take a little profit and then maybe hold some shares overnight. AMD, let's talk about that one real quick. Semis are not hot. It's a not hot sector right now. But AMD did have some pretty decent action yesterday. Worth keeping an eye on this one. Again, today maybe we get a break over this trend line. It's hanging out right around the $13 holla. You know, it could be more compelling for an entry, more of a swing on a pullback to around $12. maybe even all the way down to $11. That could be a really interesting spot to get it uh, for a longer term hold. Right, drift on down here to the $11, to this trend line, to the 200-day moving average. Potential good spot for entry. But if it takes out this trend line, maybe we get a test back up into that 1460 area. So more of a swing type trade because of the fact that it's so thick. 794 million shares in the float, almost a billion shares. SPKE. So utilities have not been a hot sector, but this is actually a pretty interesting looking chart. This just did a 2-for-1 split. It's oversold. It has this little lone wolf candle here piercing the lower Bollinger Band. Now, maybe this comes all the way down to the 200-day at about 1570 or so. Maybe even we get a test down at 1550, which could be a nice area to bounce from. But $15 even. There's a lot of support there at 15, right? Acted as support, acted as resistance, acted as resistance. See if maybe that acts as support again. Just slightly pierce the 200-day and then bounce, right? That could happen. I think it's really compelling at $15. And why do I like the sector, or why do I like this specifically? Well, you got Warren Buffett looking at making an acquisition within the space. And I think because of that, you could see some positive flow into some of these other names, and SPKE would be one of them. And let's see, not doing a whole lot in pre-market. Like I said, I think this one actually, if it pulls down into the $15 range, maybe you start to nibble at 1570 or so, and then you look to add. I'm looking at this as a swing or a long-term hold proposition. You think about Warren Buffett. Why is he buying an electric utility? I mean, and then you start looking at what's going on out there in the world, right? We're looking to get away from fossil fuels, and Tesla and electric cars, and Volvo are going to do, electric cars, or was it Volvo, or can't remember, one of those, going to do all electric, vehicles by 2019. And so what's going to happen? People are going to use more electricity. More electricity, it means higher electricity bills, right? So I think Warren Buffett's pretty smart long-term thinker, and I think that's why you keep an eye on this whole space. VST is another utility that actually has a pretty interesting look to it. This one is actually a fairly recent, or not too long ago, did an IPO. Nice little run, and then consolidation, pulling back. I'm looking at this one as a potential pullback to 16. Could be an interesting spot to maybe take it for a swing, maybe either 16 or 1575, somewhere in that area. Pretty nice look on the daily. Utilities, like I said, not a hot spot right now, but this held up pretty well. Pull back to this area, 50 EMA, 50 SMA. See if that holds the support. Could be interesting spots to take that for a swing or long-term hold consideration. SNCR getting some action in pre-market. I do not like this chart. Gap down, gap up. I mean, it looked like a buyout actually, and the news that just came out is that they're considering putting themselves out for up for sale. So it is gapping a little bit this morning. I just don't see a really clean setup here. There could be an intraday trade in there somewhere. It's only got 37 million shares in the float. Yeah, see, so this gapped up to 1790, pulled back to 1586 in pre-market, and now it looks like it's sitting at about 1670. This could be a little wild child. There could be a scalp in there. I'm just not crazy about the setup on it, but I just wanted to point it out because it was getting some action in pre-market. NADL had a little bit, this is not a hot sector at all, oil and gas, but I do think that at some point we're going to get a fairly decent bounce in the space. But for right now, everybody is pretty much no touch on it. I do have some names in the space that I've started some positions in, and I'm willing to wait and actually will be looking to add on any significant weakness to those positions. Um, but that's in my long-term hold portfolio. But this NADL was getting a little bit of a bounce. It's no volume this morning. Got a lot of work to do. It's below the 50-day moving averages in a major downtrend. And so, yeah, I probably actually would take that one off the list. Actually, it's no volume in this pre-market move. Let's see what else. PIXY. We talked about Pixie. It's a recent IPO, and you know, there's a Seeking Alpha article out on it this morning. Positive mention. Maybe on a pullback, you could close this gap all the way to 775. Maybe it bounces there. It's worth keeping an eye on Pixie. It's got a pretty small float, 15.9 million shares in the float. Worth keeping an eye on for a potential day trading opportunity. Let's see. Let's take a look and see if I missed anything here. Oh, BZUN. That was on our watch list for this week. It's actually had a pretty decent move. I missed the entry on it. Looking for it to potentially pull back to an area of support. We looked at a few other IPO names that look pretty interesting. VST we talked about. Oh, that once. So we were looking at Spark, and actually we happened to pull up this once on accident. This is a really hot looking chart daily. Potential flat top breakout on this one. I mean, this is a really big area that it's trying to get through, this 66.20. If it can take that out with some conviction, could have a nice little pop in ONCE. That was pure accidental. Yeah, that's pretty much it for, let's see, let me see what else I've got. I do like Twitter. If we see continued weakness in the tech space, I think Twitter, which actually was holding up pretty darn good yesterday, popped right up into the trend line and pulled back. Twitter, I like. Now I think, report July 27th. So on a pullback to around 1650 or so, that could be an interesting spot to take it, because Jack Dorsey picked up, I don't know, a small position of 574,000 shares, $16.52 in April, right? So maybe not a bad spot to take it, 1650. Take a little starter. Last night after the close, post-market wrap, I suggested maybe waiting on Twitter until after earnings. But you get a pullback to 1650 where Jack Dorsey buys it. Maybe you take a little nibble there, hold through earnings. It could run into earnings. You get a pop into earnings, you take your profit. But if you want to hold some into earnings, and then if you get a pullback to $15, you look to add, right, just a starter. And I'm looking at that more of in either a longer term swing or long term hold account type position. All right, let me see if I've got anything else. Looks like we've got a little bit of a pop in GLBS. And let me see if I can find any news here on GLBS. This is one of those shippers. All right, so it's spiking on good volume, but we don't know why. I don't see any news. It can be a pop and flopper, as you can see here, big spike and then pulls, so don't chase the opening candle. Look for some type of an intraday setup. They filed a shelf offering on April 13th. I don't know if that ever got priced or if they ever did the offering, but they have a shelf out there, so keep that in mind. And I would look at it only as a day trade scalp opportunity, and that's about it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this. That is, I think we've got a few good stocks to keep an eye on. Don't chase, have a plan. Know your risk reward and play size appropriate. Be careful out there, all right? And have a fantastic day. Best of success trading, and I'll see you all this weekend with the stocks to watch for next week.